The following content is designed for audio consumption. The political religious group known as the Houthis, whose official name is Ansar Allah, meaning supporters of God, has been at the center of international media coverage fairly consistently since the last months of 2023. The group's ongoing attacks on international commercial shipping passing through the Red Sea have drawn the attention of Western powers and their respective media outlets, putting the movement under the spotlight of much of the world. However, the group has been significant in that part of the world for much longer than Western media coverage might suggest. The Houthis have exercised strong political control over Yemen for over a decade, making them one of the most important non-state actors in the entire Arabian Peninsula. Since the early 2000s, the movement has been engaged in a series of wars on Yemeni territory, first against President Saleh, then against various factions that emerged following the Arab Spring, and later against Saudi and Emirati forces. Initially born as a political-cultural movement aimed at revitalizing Zaydi Shiite thought in Yemen, from the early 2000s, the movement has been characterized by strong opposition to the central power of then-President Saleh, particularly disliked in the northern part of the country where the Houthis are most active. Opposition to Saudi cultural penetration in Yemen and the fight against the extension of Riyadh's influence in the southern part of the peninsula have also been fundamental aspects of the movement. Being a distinctly Shiite political-cultural movement, it is clear that Iran has played a central role in financing and training the various armed units of the Houthis since their inception. However, unlike what one might think, the link between Tehran and the Houthis is neither solid nor as structured as that which binds Iranians to other regional proxies such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Popular Mobilization Forces in Iraq, or the Afghan-Pakistani brigades in Syria. Indeed, the Houthis have always maintained a certain degree of decision-making and operational autonomy from the Iranian central power, especially in the early years, although Tehran remains the main financier and arms supplier of the group. Despite this autonomy, however, the Houthis rightly fit into that predominantly Shiite and Iranian-led regional alliance known as the Axis of Resistance. Although the group is geographically far from the typical area of action of the movements and militias that are part of it, in recent months, it has demonstrated its ability to fight Israel even from afar, as evidenced by recent developments in the Red Sea. Anti-Saudi struggle and civil war. The Houthis, more than any other Shiite militia in the Middle East, have been on the front lines of what is called the Middle East Cold War, the hegemonic clash between Iran and Saudi Arabia, for over 2 decades. Since 2004, the group has had to endure attacks and bombings against its bases in northern Yemen by the Saudi Air Force, which has never succeeded in breaking the combative will of the movement. Between 2004 and 2010, in particular, the Houthis were engaged in direct conflict with the Yemeni central government, supported by the Saudis, in a violent war of attrition. The failure of this years-long offensive, particularly serious given the significant deployment of forces, laid the groundwork for the political rise of the movement, strengthened in those years by victory against a much better prepared and powerful enemy. For this reason, when the revolution broke out in Yemen in 2011 to 2012, the Houthis found themselves in an ideal position to seize the opportunity and gain power in the country. Initially, they aligned with other revolutionary forces, only to subsequently withdraw from the alliance and gradually carve out a completely autonomous territory under the exclusive control of the group. Between 2012 and 2015, the area under their control progressively expanded to include practically the entire western and northwestern part of the country, essentially all of the old territory of North Yemen except for Marib, including the capital Sana'a, which fell into the hands of the movement in 2015. Since then, the group has administered this vast area of Yemen autonomously, bolstered by the fact that many of the revolutionary groups that emerged following the Arab Spring and were active in areas under Houthi control have chosen to join the movement due to its greater organization and demonstrated governance ability over the years. In comparison to many local groups, the Houthis boast a well-established organizational structure that has been active for nearly 3 decades in many parts of the country, giving them a know-how regarding governance far superior to their main competitors. This organizational structure has also allowed the Houthis to survive a new wave of attacks by the Saudis. Since 2015, the Saudis have been engaged in a coalition that at various times included the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, Jordan, and Morocco, whose stated goal was to annihilate the Houthis in Yemen. Despite the evident disparity in forces, however, once again, the movement has managed to survive the coalition's violent bombings, the total naval blockade of its coasts, and the ground offensives of Yemeni militias funded by the Saudis. Precisely because of this unexpected resilience, the Saudis have initiated negotiations for about a year now, with the aim of achieving a definitive peace with the movement and a definitive cessation of hostilities, within the framework of a strategy of rapprochement with Iran. The process is progressing slowly, but it is evident that it represents a tacit admission of yet another Saudi military failure in Yemen. The arsenal and fighters of the Houthis. Estimating the numerical extent and quality and the type of weapons in the possession of groups such as the Houthis is always quite difficult. In the case of the Houthis, this process is complicated not only by the natural secrecy of this data, but also by the fact that the movement has been in almost perpetual war for more than a decade. The impact of such a long conflict inevitably generates fluctuations, both in terms of the number of militants and regarding the quality and quantity of weapons available to the movement. For this reason, any analysis of the military capabilities of the Houthis can only be, at best, an estimate. Regarding the numbers of combat units of the movement, the most convincing Western estimates speak of about 20,000/25,000 fighters, with peaks of over 30,000 reached during the most intense years of the Civil War, particularly after 2015. These are still limited numbers, but in line with those of other militias of similar importance, such as Hezbollah. Much of the individual equipment of these troops comes from the deep arsenals of Yemen, Iran, or various smuggling networks particularly active in the area. In general, however, these seem to be not particularly advanced weapons. Where the capabilities of the Houthis stand out the most is in the missile field, which according to various reports from SIS and ISS, as well as from the U.S. government, seems to be the real pride of the group. The arsenals of the Houthis contain indeed many C-801 and C-802 anti-ship missiles, of Chinese origin and probably captured from the regular Yemeni army depots, and some local versions of these, in particular those of the Mandab series, which are essentially an exact copy of the Chinese missiles. Some sources also report the use by the Houthis of old Soviet origin P-15 Termit missiles. In addition to Soviet and Chinese missiles, the Houthis also have a good number of Iranian Sayed anti-aircraft, Quds ground attack, and Sigil ballistic missiles. Also, thank you for your attention. We ask you to subscribe, leave a like and a comment. Thank you and see you next time.